that we've gone over some tips to make selections look like they belong in a scene, let's put this into practice. So we're going to start off by downloading our pixlr file. When you open it, you're going to notice it's blank because I've hidden all the options. So I've given you about 5 different table settings. Depending the style and aesthetic you want for your layout, you can kind of filter through them. What you're going to do first is pick the scene that works best for what you're picturing in your mind. Now, the goal for this activity is for us to build a Last Supper style of Thanksgiving dinner with 5 people we would want to invite as special guests. So think about how you want them to be arranged. So as you hide and show your layers, you can kind of see the setting. Okay, unfortunately, these are not separate. So you can't have like someone standing behind the table. It's a flat image, but you could have people standing around. Okay, same thing for each one of these. Some of them are very simple that allow you to kind of build. And some of them have a lot of settings if you want it to be kind of arranged for you already. This is going to be your personal choice. This one has extra space on the sides. Just try to fill in the space that the table and the floor takes up. I couldn't find the right orientation, but I like the layout of it. So I'm going to go with, I think, this table for now. And I can always change my mind later. It's not a big deal. I'm going to keep the rest hidden. Now the next part is the part that probably takes the longest. It's picking who you want to invite. Now, one of the tips I gave you was to pick the right photo. So in this picture, right, it's a forward-facing picture. I'm seeing the side of the table. So I would pick people who are standing, sitting at an angle, right? I really want to think about the arrangement of the people. If I get pictures of people's shoulders up, it's very hard to put that in this photograph and make it look natural, okay? Just keep that in mind. So I've already picked my images. I've downloaded them. I made sure they're decent resolution, that most of them should work with the scene. Let's say you download something, it doesn't work with the scene. Try to figure that out before you make the selection so you don't waste too much time making a selection that's not going to work. So in order to add an image, we know that we can go to our layers panel, hit this little plus sign right down here, and hit image. And if you have your photos saved to your computer, you should be able to find them all. So I picked my guests. We can start with AOC. I tried to find her standing in somewhat of an angle. I'm just going to have this be right here. And I'm going to select her out. Now the selecting, take your time, make sure you're getting clean, smooth selection so it really looks like she belongs. So I'm going to zoom in really close when I select. And I'm going to select all around her and take her out of this frame or erase everything outside the frame. So I'm fairly happy with my selection, but one thing you'll see is that there's like this pocket here because her arm is like on her hip. I can subtract from this selection by hitting remove and then kind of just tracing this out. A lot of you, depending the pose of your person, will have similar things that you should remove while you make your selection. So all I did was change the mode, and I'm going to trace this section. Now once I'm done, what I'm going to do is do the inverse, because technically I just want AOC, I want everything else erased. So I'm going to hit select invert, and I'm going to hit delete, and that should just give me her standing. Now, I might have to change things like her proportion, make her a little longer or taller. She doesn't look so small next to the table. I also might need to skew her and like push her so she doesn't look so flat. She might need to look like an angle. So in transform, maybe free, distort. There we go. I can pull these little buttons to pull her back a little and make it look like she's a little bit more in the right proportions to where my images are. I'm not going to do this dramatically. I'm going to be really careful with how much I push, because if not, she'll look kind of unrealistic. Okay? Now another thing you can do, let's say you make all your selections, you have all your people around the dinner table, right? And you notice that some of them look way too blue toned or red toned or doesn't really match the aesthetic of the scene. You can tweak the light. So I selected, I kind of arranged her, but now I'm going to see if I could tweak the light. Now there are such things as adjustments. So you can adjust certain layers. So I'm going to select my layer. I'm going to go to adjustment, and I'm going to look at the temperature and tint, and I'm going to consider how warm or cool AOC is. And you see that, like, I don't know, I'm going to do it extreme so you can see, like, I can change the tone of her so she looks a little warmer or cooler in the scene. So maybe she looks like she belongs a little bit more. That's one thing you can do, right? Or you can use any of the other adjustments here. There's like exposure, there's highlights, and you can play around with these settings, and it'll kind of allow you to tweak some of the color in this. Now, if you're like, that's a little too complicated, I need something a little more subtle for my change, you can use the burn or the dodge tool. Burn darkens pixels, dodge lightens, and they're over here, this half circle. When you click on it, you have the option to lighten or darken, and you can control the highlights to shadow. So if I want the shadows to be a little lighter, right, in this case, I can control how big this brush is. I can control how strong it is. So if I really want it to be subtle, maybe I can just kind of lighten parts of her leg so it looks like she's in a very bright room like the rest of this. Right? You obviously want to be light-handed with this because it's very intense, right? And if you feel like you went overhand, you went too strong with it, you can undo. Right? Those are things that kind of help you bring in your character so they look like they belong. You might have to play with the size of your people, the color tones of them, and the arrangement in the scene. Get creative. Make sure you have 5 guests. If you happen to finish early, you can kind of bring in some of your favorite Thanksgiving foods to the table because your guests are hungry. Mr. Chan and myself will have a check-in with you where we kind of see where you're at about 15 minutes into the work. So be sure that you are researching your guests and that you have picked a scene by the time we ask for you to do your first progress check-in. Your final work will be exported as a JPEG. You'll turn it into this assignment and can't wait to see who you invite to dinner.